to do is my usual thank you to everyone watching or listening around the world. Because if any of you have taken the time to share your time, your presence with us today by listening to this conversation, Dave and myself are very grateful. I will also say, just for our intro, this is episode 462 of the Simply Inspired podcast. I'm Hartery back with you again. And today I am joined by the co-founder of the Mindful Compassion Partnership, Mr. Dave Oldham. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about Dave's work, building a more compassionate world, past, present, and future, finding out a little bit about his life, as well as some of the bigger picture topics of compassion. We'll also be finding out a little bit more about the counseling work and a few other things that Dave does that connect with the Compassion Partnership, what that is. And as I always say, guys, with these shows, always the same thing. We're not here to tell you how to think or what to do. We're merely here to say to you that maybe there are different ways of thinking about things, different ways of experiencing your day to day life than perhaps you've considered currently. Now, then, after that awareness arises, which direction you choose to take that is entirely up to you. But please do listen mindfully to us, and you'll hopefully take away some applicable tips and also some relatability as well. Because the other thing I think is really good is that Dave's story, from what I know of it thus far, is very relatable. And I think that's important as well, because when people look at mindfulness, compassion, some of these sort of high-minded topics, people think, oh, well, this is up there and I'm here. Whereas actually what we're doing today is putting spiritual practices on more of a level. So that's the other thing. Please subscribe, everyone, to the Simply Inspired channel, and please keep an eye out for Dave's work as well. He's out there on social media, because by the time you've heard this story, you will want to connect with him as well, I'm sure. So, Dave, thank you very much, mate, for making the time for this, and I hope I've done that justice there. Just really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, really, as I said to you, very simple topics today that people will be interested to hear. And before we go off into the, compassion and all of this type of thing in the bigger picture, I think people will be curious why you do what you do, more specifically, where that started for you. Because I know going back a long way, you have the counseling background, you have the compassionate teaching, mindfulness background, you have a few different things that sort of intersect and connect there. So, where did that field of endeavor, quite broadly, begin for you personally, please?
Well, I think probably the late 80s, when I was going through some challenging periods in life, different things happening, different things going on, and I began to look into various therapeutic approaches, particularly hypnotherapy, I found very interesting at the time. And with that interest, developed an interest in meditation and kind of looking at what the similarities may be in those different kind of approaches, different ways of using trances and so on. And obviously I kind of found it very useful, really helpful in my life and in the way that I could meet the challenges and find particular views of events that were helpful for me. And I think the realization that I could make those choices for myself was a really big leap for me in many ways. It's almost like I didn't realize I had a choice before. I was just kind of so programmed and habitually patterned into relating or reacting to things. And developing the ability to not react as quickly was really helpful. And from that, I think gradually I got more and more interested in the world of therapies, and eventually in the late 90s began to train as a counsellor. And again, it was through an event in life that happened, and I went to see a counsellor to find out how to deal with this particular event that took place. And actually came away thinking that I want to be a better counsellor than that, because I didn't find that particular person helpful, which looking back's fine. often people need to shop around and visit different people and look at what approach might be useful for them. But I think the idea that, well, if I can be more helpful generally to people, that's a good thing in life. That's a compassionate approach. And the working compassionate really came out of an interest that I'd gradually developed in Buddhism over this period of time, and how things began to kind of fit together for me. So the idea to and the actual opportunity to go and train as a counsellor. So I made quite a big change in life. Kind of sold a house, moved into rented accommodation, went off to college, spent lots of money training, not knowing what was going to come out of it really, but there was an intention behind it to be more helpful in the world as much as anything. So
That's one.
that's kind of what led me to where I am in many ways.
That's a wonderful story and a wonderful way to begin because, like I said at the beginning, making this relatable to people, maybe there's other people out there listening who are considering that type of move themselves or they want to do something more fulfilling. So I think that's fabulous and very brave, to follow your heart, as cliche as that sounds, that kind of thing. It is a very brave decision. Okay. So you combine obviously as we mentioned, the Buddhist awareness and the some of the more, I don't really like the term Western, but if you like some of those sorts of things, like the hypnosis, very cool. And that's where the compassion aspect kind of emerged from. Can you then share with us a little bit about the compassion partnership itself? Because that is then, as I can understand it, sort of a secondary phase. So you started off with the counseling and then sometime later, please fill me in on the timelines if I'm not correct, the compassion partnership actually established. I'd like to touch on that as well because from what I've seen online, seems like a very powerful initiative. But for people who are not in the know, can you share with us what it is, how it works, and how it began, basically, please? Thank you.
Okay. Uh, yeah, so I think it was around about 2007 that I found a role working in a local daycare hospice as a counsellor for bereaved children,
Mm.
which was absolutely fascinating. But within quite a short space of time, the hospice began a program called Living Well with Cancer. And people at that point had heard that I taught meditation and did kind of relaxation work and all that kind of allied approach to such things. So I began to run groups at the hospice for people who are going through obviously either terminal illness or life-changing illnesses. And from that developed mindful compassion courses that we began to teach to patients, which were very beneficial. The feedback was quite amazing. It's a bit like anything that you begin, you're not sure how it's going to go, but you're very hopeful that this is going to be helpful for people. And so I looked at a lot of different areas of mindfulness and compassion work that was taking place really around the world and trained in quite a few different approaches with different teachers and had my own kind of Buddhist teacher that I used to talk to quite a bit about it. And gradually, and particularly working with patients, we kind of formed this course that we ran called Mindful Compassion. And the reason I call it Mindful Compassion is because quite a lot of people found the idea of self-compassion challenging. So I took the word self out of it and said, well, it's just mindful compassion for everybody, which obviously includes you. And that seemed to make it a bit easier. And quite a lot of the research into compassion work found that people were quite resistant to it. It was okay for everybody else on the planet, more or less. But when it came to the self, it was like, well, I've kind of learned that that's not okay in some ways. I don't even know why or where I learned that, but there's this feeling of it not being quite okay. So I had to work through resistance with people. And by taking the word self out of it, it seemed to help. And these courses that we began to run at the hospice, as I say, proved quite beneficial to people. And within a relatively short space of time, the Macmillan Cancer Charity picked up the work we were doing and they were partly sponsoring my role as a Macmillan counsellor at that point, and asked if we could begin to teach it to healthcare professionals, which we did, who also found it really beneficial. And that's the realization that this is for everybody. There's nobody who doesn't deserve some compassion, particularly with the difficulties that everybody faces in life and the challenges that we encounter. So this work developed over a period of about up to about 10 years, I think. And then I left the hospice and formed the Mindful Compassion Partnership. It was a group of practitioners who said kind of what we're going to do with this, what will we continue to do. Partly it was to train other people to teach what we were teaching, but also just to go on and run retreats and day retreats and weekend retreats and maybe 5-day retreats, just to continue to help people. And it kind of expanded and grew from that. And so after a few years, there's just a couple of people left as the partnership, and we've continued ever since to run and develop the practices and alongside our own training and development. And I think that's the fascinating side of it, really, is it's about kind of what you learn and what you then bring into what you're delivering or what you're teaching or sharing. And we often use the word to facilitate as opposed to teach, which again seemed to help some people who were coming to events, really. And in a way, there's that realization that we were facilitating what was already in people. The ability to care is there within most people, let's say. I'm sure people would find other people that maybe think, well, maybe they're not as caring as I could be. But so it's really that sort of personal development from what we already have, and that kind of ties in with all the Buddhist practice, the realization that everything we're looking for is already within ourselves. So the growth of these ideas and the way of delivering it and the programs that we deliver and so on kind of went hand in hand with personal development, and I think continued to do so.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, wonderful work, and it's amazing to hear the history of this as well. The world needs this kind of work, Dave. I mean, everything you said there, compassion, self-awareness, changing our own patterns, if more people did that, imagine how different the world would be. Now, also, people will be curious to know the Buddhist side of things, more specifically with yourself. If you don't mind me delving into this a lot as well, as a practitioner myself, I am also naturally curious. I am a Buddhist. Is there a particular school? Are we talking, Zen or Tibetan or a different type of thing there? Or I'd just love to hear more about your journey with that and the relevant aspects because it ties very much into as you said, the self-awareness, the compassion, and people at different stages of the path will be interested to know if they're finding their path, if they're finding where they fit, or if they've already found it but they want to deepen it. Yes, would you mind sharing a little bit more about that aspect, please?
Yeah, sure. The main approach that I've followed has been Tibetan Buddhism over the years, but I've also looked at a variety of other approaches and done kind of I did a couple of weeks retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Zen master and teacher, and a few other organisations and people. But the background overall has been Tibetan Buddhism through a monastery in Scotland called Samye Ling, where my teacher was, or is, the abbot.
Okay, now this is interesting. Not to go off on a tangent here, but first of all, Thich Nhat Hanh, yes, changed my life a lot through his work. I never met him personally, but through his work and his speaking. But yeah, Sammy Lin Alama, let me get this, Yishi Lasal Rinpoche was up there, and I've interviewed him as well. I've met him in this format, and his work changed my life a lot as well. I'm not sure if that's who you were learning with, but yeah, absolutely remarkable human and really a beacon of light in the world. And it took me a while to, track him down a little bit, but actually earlier this year, January, we sat down and had a chat like this, and I learned so much. So that's just a small world there, Dave. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I mean, I don't know him as you did, but at the same time, having met him, it was such an honor uh, to meet someone who's done such good work like that. So, Samuel Lane, there we are. Yeah, well, the same here. It's sort of combination Tibetan Buddhism and some elements of Zen. I mean, I've looked at several of the different schools, but particularly with those two, from village tradition and all those things. But anyway, that's another story. Not to go off on tangent, but I just think that's a cool small world there. Actually, yeah, people who've changed my life a lot. Okay, so that's the history there, and then obviously in terms of your counseling work and everything, you're sort of combining the hypnotherapy and subconscious reprogramming and the Buddhist practices and meditation, and kind of bringing everything together by the sound of what I was hearing there.
Yeah, the main thrust of my counselling work really took off in around about 2000 when I trained as an integrative counsellor.
Mm,
And really integrative in terms of like, well, I'm not going to focus on one particular approach because I want to learn as much as I can.
mm,
And hopefully those different kind of ways of being different approaches may fit with different people who were presenting with whatever they came with, and
mm,
trying to be able to find that one way of looking at things that was the most helpful to them.
yeah.
And in a way, the hypnotherapy kind of began to take quite a bit of a background role. Occasionally, people would ask for it, and that's fine. But on the whole, I'd kind of got into this way of, and this ties in with the mindfulness approach really, of trying to simply be with somebody in that moment and to see what would unfold between us.
Mm,
And I found that both quite challenging at the beginning. I remember very early on talking to one of my counselling supervisors and asking the question, well, I've learned all this stuff, but is it all right just to be me when I'm in there? And they were like, yeah, and I felt so relieved. It's like, oh, that's all right then. I can kind of work in that way without trying to fit theories and everything else. So that way of being with somebody, and mindfulness really helped with that. That ability to stay focused, to maintain attention, to really listen as deeply as possible to what was going on. And then maybe, if something was helpful, to suggest the possibility of, well, what would it be like to look at something this way, or this route, or and and interestingly, over time, I found more and more people came who asked about, do you know anything about mindfulness? As mindfulness grew in the secular world of mindfulness, kind of away from the Buddhist world, more and more people kind of became aware of it, obviously. I remember at one point seeing a course advertised on financial mindfulness, and I thought, well, it's got into everything now, hasn't it? You know, but
yeah.
that approach seemed to interest so many people. And maybe it's because it wasn't about trying to fix anything. It was more about learning to accept what was happening in a particular way. And the realization, like the very common quote, which I do think came from the Buddha originally, was that in life pain is inevitable, but suffering's optional. Well, how do we make it optional then? And it might be that we looked at the stories that people were telling themselves about things, going into maybe cognitive work, reframing the ways of thinking about things and so on, but in a mindful way by maintaining that attention to particularly to the impact that things have within ourselves.
Mm,
And developing that, working with people and their interest in it was very profound for me because I just kept learning. And I think that's the beauty of somebody who's a practitioner of anything really, is that you don't stop learning. If you did get to a point where you thought, I've learnt everything now, I kind of think, well, you may as well give up now then, because there's nowhere to go with it. But in terms of even working with ourselves, one of the things I often say to groups in particular is that I'm endlessly fascinating. And people kind of look at you in a strange little way for a moment. Yeah, but so are you. We all are. And we don't get to the end of it. We're just fascinating. The whole process of being human is very difficult, it's very challenging, but it's also absolutely fascinating to continue to learn and develop.
mm,
And in a way, I think particularly I was teaching a group last night, and I said one of the things that I've really tried to do with all this stuff is to simplify it, to make it more and more accessible, or to demystify it. There's another, somebody once said that. I think you've demystified it all now. So that's great because I can find it easy to practice now. It's like there's so many kind of ways of approaching it. There's so many books about it and so on and so on. But it's only in the simple practice of it that we learn it. Like learning anything, we can get lots of information about it, and it might be really interesting. But it's only in the practice of it that we learn. And going back to Lama Yeshe, I remember years and years ago, he said, really, you should just throw all your books away and go and sit on a cushion. That way you'll learn about meditation. You will never learn it from a book. And at the
Absolutely.
time I remember thinking, that's really challenging, isn't it? I love my books, hence the books. But he was right. You only learn by practicing something and developing it and understanding what comes out of it for you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that growth is fascinating how it happens. And particularly with meditation, if you look at one main approach to meditation is kind of just to sit, and in a Zen way, just sitting. So we're not trying to add anything onto the world, we're not trying to take anything away from it. We're just sitting with our experience. But out of that comes some amazing things, some amazing learning, some realization, insight, and ultimately, hopefully, a little bit of wisdom along the way.
Absolutely. That's a powerful description. And I remember hearing something similar once with a particular teacher who said to me, well, it's not about knowledge, it's about practice. And I remember sitting with him and saying, oh, you're going to share some knowledge with me and with the people. He said, no, it's about practice. And similar experience to what you said there. And at the time, it was such a shock to my system, really, but in a good way, in retrospect now. And I love that. But so many things you said there, Dave, even what you said earlier about being yourself in this, I love that as well, because that's really something that stands out, by the way. I mean this sincerely about you, hence one of my reasons for reaching out to you to connect is that authenticity, that fact that this is very much coming from your heart and soul, and it's not coming from a book, even though you've learned a lot, but it is coming from your experience. And I don't know how to do that justice with words, but it's a very positive feeling, even being sat with you now, the presence and the compassionate awareness that you have is actually quite tangible. And I know you'll know what I mean, because obviously having sat with people like Lama Nishi and people like that, you do feel it when you
Mm,
sit with them even before you say anything. And not to go off on a tangent, but I really, hand on heart, I feel that you've got good vibes there, my friend. But
good.
anyway, so okay, so that's a little bit about the journey. Now, going a little bit deeper into that aspect of how people can find the greatest sense of inner peace, and how people can also develop their own compassion as well. Because I do feel that as we become more self-aware and we become more aware of our programming and our triggers and our patterns and experiences, it obviously naturally extends to others, and we feel more compassionate about them. But I would like to go deeper into, although this might sound a little vague, the people who are searching for peace, because a lot of people think that they're searching for happiness, and maybe they are. Um, in my own journey, it's definitely been more of a search for peace. I'll say that much. And I do think a lot of people would like that more. People throw around like equanimity and these different terms, but that more sense of stability in their lives. And I would like to go deeper into that topic instinctively, because it kind of follows on from what you were just saying. Well, throw all your books away, which
Mm,
I won't do. I love my books as well, but in principle, the practice. So can we go deeper into the inner peace concept and build on that as a foundation, please?
mm.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, maybe to think about what we can practice to find that peace within ourselves is really important.
Mm,
I remember a long time ago saying that we can find peace in the stillness between each breath.
That's
And as we
phenomenal.
breathe out, we know that at the end of the out breath, there's this little pause before we breathe in again. And as a practitioner, I found that incredibly beneficial to be able to begin to identify that moment and then to begin to say, okay, well, where do I feel that within me? Where do I feel the end of the breath happening? And discovered this kind of place within my body, which I now call the balance point, which is almost like the middle of everything, where I find some stillness. And that stillness feels peaceful and calm. And it's just a moment where you get it, and then you breathe in again, and it's almost like, well, can you stay connected to that place in the body while you continue to let the breath happen? And again, through practice, was like, oh, I can do that. And I began to call it your place of inner refuge, this thing that you carry around within you that's always there, and it's always at the end of the out breath, and you can find it really easily. And maybe through practicing that, you begin to find that you remain connected to it. So you form a connection within yourself. And that connection is bringing like the mind down into the body, into the heart, if you like, where we want to find that inner peace. And because we are connected to it, if we lose it, we can always come back to it really quickly. And it doesn't go anywhere. It remains where it is. It's like the balance point right in the middle of everything, where you can just be. Now, with that connection, you can then be aware that it's there and realize that your awareness is peaceful. Awareness doesn't get involved with anything. It's just awareness. It's what a teacher called Charlotte Jocko Beck used to call simple mind. And we should all strive for a simple mind. And aren't we brought up to believe that that's probably the worst thing we could do, is to become simple? And yet, awareness is simple because it's not doing anything. It just knows what's present. And it's present now. Wherever you are, at any time, awareness is present. And so is that connection to that sense of inner peace. And I'm never saying this is easy. It's very simple. But the challenge is everything that's going on in the world, including what's going on in our own minds, you know, the thought processes and so on, the habitual patterns we've learned, the concern that this isn't all right for me to care for myself, the self-critical view of things. Oh, I can't really do that. All those things are just what we learn eventually, objects in our awareness. They're not awareness itself. They're just things that happen within our awareness. And if we learn to relate to them from awareness, we learn to not get too involved with it all. I used to often like sort of saying to people, well, you're just a bit crazy, aren't you? But then aren't we all? Because we've learned to be. We've learned to create a mindset that's just all over the place. And it's involuntary. We're not even doing it on purpose. You know, when did you last have a thought on purpose? But if you can see it's just a thought that's happening, it's kind of flowing through your awareness and not attached to it, life becomes a lot more simple. And again, in that simplicity, there is peace and calm and quiet and stillness. Everything we've been looking externally for, even happiness and joy and all those wonderful things, it's within us. It's not out there. And I like the view that really, in a way, you know, we kind of are the centre of our own universe. How we relate to it is really important. And if we realise that we're relating to it in a way that's somehow creating suffering for ourselves, we could choose not to do that. We could learn cultivate our abilities to not engage things in a particular way, change the patterns of our inner behavior, our inner self-talk. And that way we're looking after ourselves. We're being compassionate. If what we're creating is suffering and we realize it's us that's creating that, compassion is about relieving or alleviating our own suffering and the suffering of others. But many teachers would say, well, you've got to begin with yourself, because otherwise you're projecting all your stuff out onto the world, aren't you? It's like, well, don't do that. Get your own stuff sorted first, as best you can. And that way, what you give out to others is kind of hopefully the best you can be. Certainly, one of my mantras in counselling was to be the best that I could be for the clients. And I used to go running and things and just say to be the best you can be, to be the best you can be. You're doing this to be the best you can be, which is hopefully good enough for them. But to be the best you can be, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to do the things that are of benefit. Not easy stuff, because we're very challenging, particularly to ourselves in many ways. But if we can alleviate that suffering, then we can help alleviate it in others. We might even suggest ways that we maybe, learned to say a mantra. I found that really beneficial. What might it be if you made up your own mantra? And even kind of encourage people to make up their own, not to be given one. I know, come up with one yourself that's really beneficial. And one way to do that is to think, well, what is the most helpful thought my mind can create towards me? And what is the kindest thought my mind can create towards me? And out of those two, can I make a little mantra that reminds me of that all the time? Well, one of the ones I really like is to say, what is the most beautiful thought your mind can create? And people realise that when they're doing that, they're thinking of beauty. So that feels nice, that feels beautiful. Or with the kind thought, oh, that feels kind. I've come up with a kind thought. Or a helpful thought, well, that feels helpful. And one of the common things I think people struggle with is the idea to be positive. I said, well, don't try and be positive, just try and be helpful. Positive isn't always easy to find, is it? If somebody's just died, you're not going to be very positive about it, but you can be helpful towards yourself. If you've suffered any kind of loss in life, it's hard to find positives. We might do eventually, there might be a silver lining to that cloud, but in the present moment, it's like, well, can I be helpful? What can I do that helps me? And I often encourage people to think about the conversation they have first thing in the morning when they're waking up. What are you saying to yourself? Is it like, oh, here's another day? Or is it like, okay, what will I do today that's helpful for me? What will I do today that I enjoy? What will I do today that's kind and looks after me? And can I then give that to others? So to start the day in a helpful, kind way, if we can. Certainly one of the Buddhist contemplations is this precious human life. I mean, it's miraculous that you've woken up, isn't it? You've gone from unconscious to conscious. It's like, here's a new day. Wow, that's great. Because I might not have woken up, and then what's going to happen? Who knows? But the fact that I have done, and I'm here, and I've got this precious human life, how will I use that today? What will I do that benefits me and other people? What can I think of? And again, we're working with our thoughts then. If I develop that, can it become more heartfelt? Because actually I'm feeling that care now over time. We create a habit of caring for ourselves. And it begins to get more embodied. People use that word embodied an awful lot. It's like, well, it's how you live. If you embody something, you're living it. It's no longer just an idea. It's like, no, this is how I am. This is how I be in the world. Hopefully how I relate to things that are happening. And again, that often sounds quite simple, that. It's not always easy. But if we remember it's simple, that can be helpful. and we can build the day each day in that way, right through to the end of the day, because there's that sort of understanding, and we have about 80,000 thoughts or something, which, busy mind. But at the end of the day, can we practice gratitude? That's become a very popular practice over time. I remember a client coming along and saying, "Oh, I've bought a gratitude journal." I said, "Oh, that's nice." Yes, I got it from a certain supplier that I won't mention, but it says on the front gratitude journal, it's got a lovely picture, and inside it's full of blank pages. I did mention, well, you could get a pad from the supermarket, couldn't you, for 50p? How much was that? 17.99. Right, okay. But it said to me, this has become hugely popular now, which is brilliant, because gratitude practice, just thinking of a few things we're grateful for and holding them in mind for a period of time, each time we think of them, maybe 30 seconds, helps kind of rewiring the brain towards a happier state. And if we do it last thing at night, we tend to sleep better. We're creating a grateful mindset to take into sleep. Again, it's almost like common sense, this stuff. We can kind of simplify it down to these ideas. Well, this is what everybody can do. You certainly don't have to be a Buddhist to do this. You don't have to be an anything to do this. Just be a human. And in a way, we used to say that a lot of the idea of developing mindful compassion is just to become more human, because we have this within us. We have this way of being, these skills, if you like. Mindfulness is a skill, the skill of paying attention. That's kind of all it is, really. It's very simple. If you pay attention to something, you become mindful of it. We can all pay attention to things. It doesn't have to be this long-winded sort of definition of what mindfulness is. It's no, just pay attention. Then you're practicing mindfulness. If you want a complicated definition from a book, great. But when you practice it, just realize you're paying attention. And maintaining attention is the practice. And the longer you can do that for, the more mindful you're becoming. You're cultivating that way of being. And yeah, you do it in a particular way. You do it with kindness. Be patient. Stop trying to hurry everything up and get it now. It's like, no, it'll take a bit of time to develop. So be patient. Be calm.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, first of all, I'm going to listen to that back and make some notes after the day. They just
Okay.
really. But also, yes, I mean, first of all, bringing people back to a certain extent of what they inherently know, which is something that you mentioned earlier, very, very profound. The gratitude thing, that's funny. But even on 50p, I didn't even spend that much because I actually picked up a pebble from the beach, and every morning I hold that just to um, basically encourage mindfulness with that practice of something that's grounding physically, and think of gratitude. And after a period of time of doing that, I find I don't really need to hold the stone because it kind of becomes more ingrained, although I still do sort of hold the stone. But I just thought that was funny with the gratitude journal. I mean, obviously you have seen the commercialization of many of these things from where it started, which we won't get into that today. But at the same time, bringing it back to the simplicity and what you said there about the simple minded, I hadn't
Mm,
really looked at it that way. So that's actually a big takeaway for myself personally. And as I said to you at the beginning, that sort of overview of that's the reason I chose peace. Is a lot of people focus on happiness, and as you're well aware, there's a few issues with that. With as you achieve the happiness, it kind of raises the bar, and there's all these things. So I prefer to focus on joy, but that's why I chose inner peace, because it seems maybe it's a good foundation to build on. Now, with this today, and with the time that I've had for this, we've covered a few nice topics. But I tell you something that comes to my mind, if that's the right term. I mean, it's more of a heart thing. Is I'd actually like to talk with you again, Dave, as well after the day, maybe on, if you're open to it, on a particular topic where we can go more in depth on a
mm,
particular topic. I mean, the thing is, I'm not trying to do loads and loads of these to sort of share everything and give all that away. But I also have noticed, you see, in my podcasting journey, I started off like yourself in a different sphere altogether. I started off as a sports journalist. I was working for different newspapers doing that. I was quite successful doing that, and it was very cool. But then there was a point in time where I became sort of disillusioned with a few things, and there was some people throw around all these terms of like shadow work and all this stuff. There was basically trauma that, awakened stuff within myself and sort of started to take my life in a different direction, which over the past sort of 5 years or so has gone in a completely different direction to where I'm living, what I'm doing, and everything that's going on now. The reason I tell you that is my podcast has evolved with it. So as I've been growing, the people I've been speaking to have also been growing. And so it's very much in the space now of transitioning even from life stories. So I've been a specialist specifically in life stories for a long time into even deeper wisdom. And today we've shared a little bit of wisdom, and that was my intention. Find out a little bit about you, make spirituality relatable to people in terms of how you got there from sort of from A to B and all the twists and turns along the way, and then share a topic, compassion, inner peace, and that's it. That's enough for people to take in and be able to practically apply and understand. Because even what you said just now, there's multiple aspects, multiple categories in there that people could focus in on. But if you'd be open to it, I would also maybe like to do that with another topic after today because I've also run late today, so I haven't got as much time. And I'd be open to discussing with you a topic that you feel would be the most beneficial to people after today. But for today, really, really nice wisdom. And that's all I try and do is put, bite-sized chunks of wisdom, if you like, out there on the internet so that people can gain from them. And I will also say as well, once again, people, they do need to contact you if they want to know more. Our viewers, if you do feel that heart-centered feeling to connect with Dave, as I did. I felt that from your profile. It's largely instinctive. It's not about accolades or about any of these amazing things you've done. It's just, it feels right to connect with this guy. I really feel that pull. And I will say to our viewers, if any of you feel that, please connect with him because Dave, you're a very open guy. Just so I don't forget to say that.
Sure,
But
thank you.
today, absolutely really nice wisdom, taking things back to some basic understandings, taking things back to truths that people know in their hearts, but we forget about them. I mean, a lot of these things we know growing up, but we forget about them as we get older and as we go to school and we, go crazy with getting results and we have to be here by here and here by here. So it's in my mind, it's very, very, very powerful. I'll have to run in the moment because everything has run late today.
Okay.
I would like to thank you deeply, and I will bow in this context for your presence. Not only for your knowledge, but sharing your experience and sharing your presence for
Mm,
this brief time. But in the hope that it helps even a handful of people
yeah,
to experience their day-to-day life differently. And like I
cheers.
said at the beginning, that's my intention. So thank you so much for
Wonderful.
that, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. And if I may say as well, you'll have your preferences, but this kind of sharing of wisdom in a structured way could be a very good system for you because you have a lot to share. And I'm not sure if it's something that would interest you. It may not, but this kind of format as well. I'm amazed because I will also say before I go, as the last thing, I would love to talk longer, but that's life. I would
Mm,
also say that as I'm clarifying my own path personally, as you've probably noticed, some of what you shared has been deeply helpful in that regard as well, more than I expected.
oh,
So
thank you. God bless.
I also appreciate that because what you do is more than a job. It's a calling. It's a journey. It's what you said. It's you embody
Mm,
these teachings. That's very true. So some of the things that you've shared there have also filled in a few blanks for myself as well,
great.
and I'm very grateful for that. Even though that wasn't necessarily my intention. I mean, I always learn something, but today I've learned quite a lot. So I
Thank,
also want to thank you very much for that as well.
thank you.
Yeah, I do. I mean that. I'm quite surprised. So I will step away and process that, but it's very positive. So
Brilliant.
thank you very much. You have a wonderful rest of your day, my friend, and
Thank you.
I will send you this when it's out. So if
Thank
you'd
you.
like to use it anywhere, please do, and I'll promote it my side. But yes, I'd also would like to connect with you again, if at
Yeah,
all.
sure.
It's very much something from in here, not from here at all. It's very much
Brilliant. That's
so.
good.
Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You take good care of yourself.
I will. I will be as helpful to myself as possible today, as you
Brilliant.
said there. That's another reframing. So thank you so much, Dave, and you take good care of yourself. Also, I will speak with you soon. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.